Hey, welcome to Inside the Album. It's the podcast where we take a classic rock album and talk about all the stories about the songs on that album, the recording of that album, and what was happening with the band, and just really getting to enjoy some of our favorite music. I'm Don Seckler. That's Tommy Hilkin. How's it going, Tom?
Oh, it's going good, Don. Good to be with you, man, as usual. I have no idea who you are, to my left, to my right, but we're all good.
So I'd like to thank all the people who are listening and watching us on YouTube. We're on every podcast platform out there. So Apple, Spotify, the Google one, anywhere you can get a podcast, you're going to find us. If you're new, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the next hour or so as we go through this great rock and roll album. We're going to be talking about the first album from Boston today. If you would like to check us out, you could check out InsideTheAlbum.com, and on the website there, we have every episode of the podcast right on the homepage. There's a cool merch store, lots of fun, and we're also working with a charity. So tell us all about our charity connection, Tom.
Well, nice, Don. And reason why we're doing Inside the Album is to get people some visibility for Music for Mark. Is what we're doing is we're bringing music to the world through kids. So we're going to give musical instruments, musical lessons, wherever we can find it, where we can help kids. You know, you and I love music so much. It's been a big part of our lives, and we want to see it continue with kids getting musical instruments and bringing real music to the world.
Yeah, so if you have any instruments laying around, like we say, in the basement, the attic, a closet somewhere, it hasn't been touched in years, reach out to us and we will repurpose that and make sure it gets into the hands of somebody to get their life started in music.
Beautiful. Musicformark.com. Thanks, Don.
Yes. All right. So here we are. We're talking about the first album by Boston. So, and we say this a lot, but here's another record where every song was a hit.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not a long record. It's got 8 songs listed. There's actually 9 songs because number 3, Foreplay, Long Time, is actually put together into one song. But it's a super interesting story. So we're going to talk about the band a little bit and who's in the band. But the driving force behind this band is Tom Schultz. So Tom is the main guy in the band and really played most of the instruments on the record. So he plays the guitar, he's doing acoustic guitars, electric guitars, he's doing the keyboards, bass. The drums are the only thing that he really was not involved with. We had Brad Delp, who was the singer in the band, and also plays a little bit of acoustic guitar. You've got Sib Hashian, I think it is. I'm not sure of the pronunciation, but he plays drums on all of the tracks except one, which is Rock and Roll Band. Then you have Jim Maseda, Jim Masdia. Is it Masdia? I guess it is. Yeah. Then you have Jim Masdia, who plays drums on Rock and Roll Band. And actually, we'll talk about him a little bit, and Tom, and he was very involved early on with the songs, and we'll delve into that a little bit deeper. And then there's a couple of other musicians. You've got Barry Goudreau, who's played some guitar, and also Frank Sheehan, who played bass on a couple of the songs. So the album was released in August of 1976. And so when we look at the charts, like in 76, 77, it's kind of a mellow time in rock. So rock started kind of picking up in the early 70s, like we talked about with David Bowie last week. Yeah. And then the mid 70s, it kind of mellowed out a bit. So you had Frampton Comes Alive, which, a rock record, but, pretty middle of the road, not hard rock at all.
Right. Yeah.
Pretty much pop rock was a huge album for, especially for the teenage girls. They love Peter Frampton, right?
Hey, so did I. Now I think about that, dude, beyond huge, that album, man.
Yeah.
And not only that, the radio airplay of that album was insane. You didn't even have to bother listening to the radio anymore.
Right. Yeah.
It was on.
There was a few songs on there that just were dominant. Then there was the Fleetwood Mac album, Fleetwood Mac, which was that the first album with McVie? I mean, with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks?
I believe so.
I think
Rumors
so.
came out the next one after that.
Rumors
right?
was the one after, yeah. So the first Fleetwood Mac album, it had a couple of popular songs or hits, that were good, but it was not the Rumors album, which was just again another dominating album that came a little bit later.
They were just coming together, yeah.
And then also very popular at the time was the Dreamweaver by Gary White.
Gary Wright, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Come on.
So,
Wow.
if you've never heard Dreamweaver, the song, just Google it or, on YouTube and listen to it. It's so schmaltzy and awful.
Come on, dude, but it's in your head and you're going.
It is. I can't stop hearing it now.
Weaver.
Yeah. So the landscape was, from a rock perspective, it was pretty sucky at the time. It wasn't a really groundbreaking time for a lot of bands. So this record came out and just sold extremely well right out of the gate. Broke sales records. It became the best-selling debut album in the USA at the time. Ended up selling 25 million records worldwide.
That's an album.
And one of the things, beyond all the success on the charts and everything, one of the things that Boston is kind of attributed with is the kind of this wave of produced rock sound. So this album has a much different sound than anything else that was out at the time. So it's a little hard to, like, in retrospect, to go back and listen to it, and you listen to it and you go, oh, it sounds okay, it sounds pretty good. But for the time, it was so highly produced and the sound was so precise. That's like for lack of a better word. It was this combination of studio technology and the concept that they had of making a big record with really crystal clear sound. And, so that whole produced sound, for lack of a better word, was really kind of groundbreaking.
It was as close to technically perfect as you could get.
Yeah, so it was a lot less about, hey, bang this out and, we're the Ramones and, boom, 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 boom. And it was a lot more about, it was thought out, and the goal, Tom Schultz's goal, was to make like this great sounding record. And so we're going to get into his history and you'll understand a little bit more about that why as we talk about that.
Awesome.
Tom Schultz had studied classical piano in his childhood. And then he got involved in the music scene in Boston in the late 60s. So he started to write and he started to create demos in his apartment, basement apartment that he had in Boston with Brad Delp, the singer. And so they're working on these songs and they had sent out, tapes to the record companies and received all these rejection letters from all the major companies throughout like the early 70s. So they start in the late 60s, early 70s, they're sending out these demos, just getting, working on this stuff and then getting rejected and rejected and rejected. And so all the way up until 1975, and then the demo got into the hands of Epic Records, who ended up signing them. So this was not an overnight thing by any stretch. They were working on these songs and they had this kind of concept in mind, but it took them, a solid almost 10 years before they were able to get a record deal.
Wow.
And so take a look at the cover here. This is, it's this kind of spaceship guitar. It's a very modern, this whole album is at the time was very modern, forward thinking, very technical, or very technological for technology at the time, recording technology. And so this cover, is fairly iconic. People, thought it was cool at the time. It's still kind of around. You see it, it instantly now. But it's this whole spaceship guitar kind of concept.
The old spaceship guitar concept.
So Tom Schultz went to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, very good school. And that's when he started writing music. So the guy was a really super, super smart guy. Got a master's degree. And while at night he was playing keyboards in bands in the Boston bar and club scene. And that's how he met up with Jim Masteda. And so the two of them started this whole kind of worked on this concept of this project where it was this crystal clear vocals, really kind of like bone crunching guitar sound. So they were really about the technical sound part of it. And that definitely comes through as you listen to the record.
Yeah, it's funny. It's really like sometimes you think about what you're talking about right now is some of this stuff was probably overthought, which puts so much pressure on them. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah, well, and they're smart. So this guy's a super smart guy. He's a mechanical engineer. So he was working for Polaroid and doing product development for Polaroid. So they're creating new technology at Polaroid. And so that's his mindset.
Right.
So these two guys put together, so with the money he was making at Polaroid, he spent it all on building a small studio in his basement. And it was literally like in a basement where this whole album was recorded. It's crazy.
That's cool. That's great. Yeah.
So they had going back to when they were going after the record companies, like 73, they had put together a 6-song demo tape. And so they were sending it out to every record company. It had the songs that are actually on the album. So it had More Than a Feeling, Peace of Mind, Rock and Roll Band, Something About You, Hitch a Ride, with a different title on the tape, and then Don't Be Afraid, which they actually ended up not using until the next album, which was Don't Look Back. They had been, again, they're working on these songs for a long time. This was not an overnight, hey, let's go in the studio and knock this stuff out right now. This is, these guys are, I think as an engineer, okay, they're very premeditated and logical, and so music is actually very mathematic. And so generally people who play music and have high levels of skill, especially in more complicated music, generally have that math ability as well. That's a fairly common thing. So there was a lot of thought that went behind this. It wasn't like we've heard where they said, okay, let's just bang out a few songs and magic happened.
But interesting, you said they had to submit 6 songs in today's world, right? How far we've come. 1 song and you're a star.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens.
A lot of times now.
Yeah. So in November of 1975, they actually got a group together because it was pretty much the two of them, and they were getting, guys to play with them, some of the people we've mentioned. And they were playing under the name Mother's Milk, and they were able to play for a group of executives in a Boston warehouse that was also what Aerosmith was using as their practice facility. They got to do the kind of performance and with the executives, and that ended up helping them get that contract. And their initial contract was 10 albums over 6 years.
Yeah, there's a big story behind that. But go ahead. I'm sure we'll save that for another day. Unbelievable pressure and stress was put on them by the record company.
Yeah. And so, the label wanted the band to go to Los Angeles and re-record the songs with a different producer. Tom Schultz didn't want to do that. He wanted to be in charge. And so they had this guy, John Boylan, who was a friend or who came on board to kind of help manage the project. And they had Boylan kind of run interference with the label and keep the label happy. One thing that Boylan did do was suggest that the band change the name from Mother's Milk to Boston, which, I don't know. Either way, I think is fine, but Boston is catchy.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah. So the studio in the basement, and it's really just a guy's basement. So it's not like, when I say studio, it's just because they recorded it there, but it's really the guy's basement. It was so small, they had to move stuff out of the room to set up the drums.
I could just imagine the sound, though. I would have loved to have been there.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting thing too. So when Boylan was working with them, he arranged for Delp, the singer, to have a custom-made Taylor acoustic guitar for thousands of dollars, and they charged that to the album budget. Tom Schultz recorded More Than a Feeling with a $100 Yamaha acoustic guitar.
There you go.
And, so there is a big difference between expensive guitars and inexpensive guitars. But it just goes to show you that you can make music sound great with almost any instrument. You know, it's more about the playing and the production and all those sort of things.
Yeah, once it's produced, you can do just about anything with it.
So again, they were kind of, you know, trying to put this ruse over on the record company, and what they did was they sent the band to LA to go and record one song while Tom Schultz was basically working on everything else back in Boston in his basement studio. So they kind of, you know, did that as a smokescreen to say to the record company, okay, we're doing this, but they weren't really doing it. They were back in Boston recording the whole thing. So Tom Schultz wrote or co-wrote every song on the album, with the exception of "Let Me Take You Home Tonight," which was written by Brad Delp, the singer. And he pretty much played all of the instruments and recorded and engineered all the tracks. You know, so he focused on this sound where they wanted big, giant melodic hooks and very heavy, classically inspired guitar parts. So he definitely, you know, they had this concept of what they wanted to do, and they followed through on it.
Yeah. Killer album. It worked.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's dive into the album here. We're going to start off with the lead track, which is probably their most famous song, "More Than a Feeling." And kind of a bit of a fade in here on the opening guitar part on the $100 Yamaha acoustic. Damn.
Yeah.
So they definitely followed the "don't bore us, get to the chorus" part, the theory, right? Like the first minute, they got one verse, bam, right into the chorus. It's just so amazing. And see, it's hard to describe to people who weren't around at the time, but the sound of this album, it's so different. It's so much clearer. It's so much crisper. You feel like you're there in the room almost with them. And that wasn't something that was easy to achieve. And most bands hadn't done that in the past.
It's just amazing. But man, you were just so prolific. Don't bore us. Get to the chorus.
You never heard that before?
I just got educated. Look at that. Was beautiful. Nice.
Or forget the shit, get to the hits.
That's our album.
Yeah. So Tom Schultz wrote this song. It's about a guy who wakes up with the blahs, turns on the music, gets lost in kind of dreaming of this days with Marriane. So he said that it was written about a fantasy event, but it's one that almost everybody can identify with. Somebody like of losing somebody that was important to them, and the music taking them back to that time.
Yeah.
But it turns out that Marriane was a real person. So Tom said she was his older first cousin, who I had a crush on when I was 10. And I ran into her many, many years later, and she was annoyed at me for mentioning that she was my older cousin.
Yeah, that's not good, especially in the Northeast.
So that's interesting that, it was a little bit of a kid crush that he had.
Yeah. You know what's great about this? We're sitting here, and, you and I, we always talk music. We just love it so much. But you think about what a great voice and that riff can just do. We always talk about that.
It's those two
riff,
things.
Right?
Yeah. It's that the voices, Brad Delp's voice is amazing.
Oh,
and then the riff comes in.
And that guitar riff.
Yeah. It's just crazy good.
Iconic.
Yeah.
Iconic.
Legendary for sure. So Schultz definitely worked on this. He worked on this song for over 5 years. So again, this is not stuff that came together quickly. 5 years. But again, this guy's an engineer, you know, he goes through a process. He's got steps. He's doing things in order. He's sticking with it. He's continuing to work it until he solves the problem and gets what he wants to get. It's a total engineer mindset, right?
Yeah, that drives you a little crazy. You know what? Done is better than perfect. I truly believe that, especially when it comes to music.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you for the most part. But this is just, you know, this one, I think it paid off. You know, it definitely was there.
And this is his creative process. Who are we to say? Don't get me wrong.
Exactly. That's the other side of it, is that everybody's has a different process.
Yeah, but 5 years is a long time.
It is a long time. So he was also inspired by Walk Away Renee. So that heart-tugging mood, you know, of Walk Away Renee by the Left Banks. That's kind of what he used as an inspiration for this song.
That's a great song.
Yeah.
And the Four Tops sang that as well. Just
exactly.
I'm a fountain of knowledge, Don.
So on this track, Sib Hashian played the drums, but Tom Schultz played every other instrument on the track. And there's a lot of stuff on these songs. So it's not just a guitar and drums and bass. There's keyboards, there's some horns in there and stuff. So, you know, there's a lot going on, but he was able to play all of these different instruments.
I would like to have a conversation with Tom Schultz.
See, he took a leave of absence from Polaroid to complete the album, but when he went back to work after it was released, and disco was big, so he wasn't sure that a rock record would get an audience.
Wow!
So he was very excited when coworkers would then call him and say, "Hey, I just heard More Than a Feeling on the radio," and he said after it happened a few times, he was confident enough to quit his job.
Oh, good for him. Take a leave of absence.
Yeah.
I ain't losing my paycheck.
Well, but at the time it was Polaroid. He's a mechanical engineer. He's probably making a decent amount of money, you know?
Oh yeah. Hang on tight.
It was enough to build a studio.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to track number 2. This one is Peace of Mind. Again, a great riff, right?
Yes.
So the other thing, and you really hear it on this song, is the sound of those guitars. And so, you know, this again is something that was completely unique. You know, the stuff that he was doing in his basement was kind of groundbreaking. And a lot of what he's known for now is that technology that he used in these effects and things to get these kind of sounds that nobody had really gotten before.
Yeah, it's a great sound. Now you think of it, what a great album. My God.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So this song is about finding your passion. And, you know, he kind of seems to sympathize with people who are working for companies and don't feel fulfilled. It was the third single from the Boston album. The other two were More Than a Feeling and Long Time. And they said they could have released more singles, but they didn't have to because rock radio was playing every song on the album, you know, so they didn't have to push a single. So
True.
it was just getting played. So it was crazy. And like we said, it went on to, in America, it sold, I think, 17 million and like 25 million worldwide.
You just got me thinking about the 70s, and why these hits, right? The 70s had a lot of disco was still mixed in there, right?
Yeah.
But pop songs were huge in the 70s. I mean, literally they like the Have a Nice Day 70s, Helen Reddy, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Huge music was all over the place in the 70s.
Yeah, it really was. And I think that this, even though it's 76, this kind of leans towards like what was going to happen in the 80s with all the techno, the new wave and the more use of the synthesizers and more of a digital sound as opposed to an analog one. But again, this is kind of like these sounds were completely unique for the time.
Yeah, they were new.
Yeah. So the next track is number 3. And so it's 2 songs together. Foreplay / Long Time. So let's take a listen to that. So I just want to pause us here for a second, and then I'm going to jump ahead to the next section. But so this to me, there's a lot of like ELP, right? Or it's kind of classical, it's kind of progressive, but it's not.
I just wrote it down. I wrote down ELP and Yes.
Yeah.
That's who I was seeing back in the day then, you know what I mean? So,
yeah, exactly. And those were, 72, 73, 74. That's what there was a lot of that progressive music. So the first part is, it's a sexual reference, a foreplay, and it's based around that Hammond organ riff. So it's that kind of very classical riff, and then the guitars come in and kind of rock it up a little bit. All right, so let's take a listen to the other part of this, which is Long Time, the beginning of that. This comes in around 2:10 or so.
I'm holding on.
Keep holding.
It's a long foreplay.
That's what she said.
2 minutes of foreplay. Are you kidding?
2:30. Now here we're back to the Boston rock with that, always with the solo at the beginning, right? The opening riff is that lead riff.
Great riff.
Still that organ in the background there. Just another great riff, right?
Awesome.
Well, I'm taking my time, I'm just moving on. You'll forget about me after I've been gone. And I take what I find, I don't want no more. It's just outside of your front door. Ah, yeah. It's been such a long time. It's been such a long time.
Again, great, amazing riffs. And, a lot of times with the more progressive artists, the riffs aren't as strong. You know what I mean? Like, this is still a rock riff, It's still
Sure.
that rock guitar riff, which sometimes gets lost in like a Yes or ELP type of King Crimson type of music. But this whole thing runs about 7:47, and Long Time was issued as a separate single that only ran 3 minutes and 3 seconds. So perfect for radio. And, so that's why they chopped that off and released it as a separate single.
Yeah. What's interesting, now you got me thinking about it. If you sit back and listen to this, you can hear the creativity in the studio. Like it's truly studio music. Even the guitar riffs, they're great, but they just seem a little not like so natural riffs.
Right.
Like,
they're more thought out, more planned, rather than just, hey, this is what hit me. So it's very methodical. Yeah, this whole record is very methodical.
You just got me thinking about it. As I listen to those riffs and the music, it's like it's scientifically put together to be a great song. It's kind of interesting. It's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. And that's, again, back to that engineer brain, right? So it's very organized. It's very logical. It's very structured. It's very do A, get B, A, B, C, D. It's always steps. It's organized.
I like how you just say, do I know? Look who you're talking to. No, I don't know.
No, you don't know at all.
It's structured and organized.
So Foreplay was actually the first song that Tom wrote for Boston. So he wrote it in 1969 when he was studying at MIT and recorded it in 71.
Oh, there you go.
With Jim Mastia. And they recorded it in Jim's basement. And over the next few years, Schultz made various different demo recordings of this song. And, so it evolved over time a little bit, but it was something that he had around for a long time.
Well, that's where the influence, now that you look at it's the way back then, now you can see the ELP, the S, I don't know what kind of music you listen to, but obviously you must have heard some of it.
Yeah, sure, definitely. And he was classically trained at piano, so that has a factor as well, because that progressive music is often close to classical music.
Amazing. All right.
Right away, these guys were playing arenas. Their debut album was certified platinum by March of 77. So the album was released in August. And then by March, it was already, a huge seller.
Yeah. For some reason, and I mean, like you said, maybe it was the music of the time or just the time period itself, but, they really were just like, they blew up out of nowhere. This album just blew up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, it was so different. It was such a different sound. And it was that record. It was, so I remember I had a Walkman with the original Sony Walkman, the original one with the little orange headphones.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of those tapes that you put on and you're like, holy cow, in the headphones, this is insane how good it sounds.
Yeah.
So the production values, I think, had a lot to do with it. Plus the riffs are catchy. The songs are catchy. It's, it's fun, easy. It's not complicated. There's no, where the Ziggy Stardust, where we talked about last week, has a bit of a story going through it. This is very surfacey. It's very, in terms of the stories, it's easy to understand. It's, hey, I woke up this morning and I remember this girl. It's, I'm going on the road with my rock and roll band. It's not, there's no complications here in terms of the stories. So it makes it, I think, a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, it works.
All right, so let's move on to track number 4. This one is Rock and Roll Band. Again, another killer riff. Right out of the gate.
There you go.
With that space. So you know what I hear in this? I hear Aerosmith.
Wow. You can
Right?
imagine.
That riff, that guitar
Yeah.
riff, it sounds like, it's a little less dirty than an Aerosmith riff,
Right,
not the lyrics, but the actual riff. Like an Aerosmith riff always has a little grungy, to it. And this is a little bit more middle of the road, but I can hear that in the background there.
There you go. Well, you know what we always talk about, who influences who, right?
Yeah.
If you're in Boston, chances are you know about Aerosmith.
Right, exactly. And,
Yep.
so this song tells the story of a Boston band, a rock band playing their dues, busking, sleeping in cars, playing the bar circuit. Eventually they get a big break with a record company guy and signs them a new deal. But it's the exact opposite story of the band, which is basically Tom Schultz in his basement recording this stuff. So a lot of people assume that it was the story of the band Boston because the lyrics are in first person and they're singing about being from Boston.
Right.
That's not the case at all.
Oh, see, I would have thought it was about them.
Yeah. So interesting, but good, great song. So let's move on. We're going to hit song number 5. And this one is Smokin'.
Hey, guitar riff.
Yeah.
Gonna play a song, a little bit of rock and roll.
Little boogie woogie, right?
Oh, yeah.
The band's gonna take control, yeah. We're getting out today. We'll pick you up and take you away. We're getting down tonight. Smoking, looking tonight, just keep on talking. Smoking, I feel alright, mama, I'm not joking.
And again, we're at, we're at 45 seconds. We're already through the first chorus. So these guys, they're not wasting any time. They're getting right to the meat of the song.
Yeah.
But
They
again,
made songs. Yep.
great riff. And, a song is about having a good time, listening to music. Some people interpreted it as being about pot because it's lines like keep on token. The song is also 4 minutes and 20 seconds long, which is the 420 thing is a pot smoking thing.
Ah.
So
How do you know that?
I researched this
Good boy.
on the internet.
That's the answer I was looking for.
So I don't know if that's their intention. It was the mid 70s. Everybody smoked weed. Who knows? But all in all, great song. And these are great driving songs, right? These are great songs to have on your car. You got the windows open. It's a spring day and you're cranking down the highway. Just so much fun.
So I don't know which song came out first, to say the truth. I'm just here to hang out with you. But Flirting with Disaster, another great song with a great guitar riff. And this song reminds me a lot of Flirting with Disaster.
Similar, right? Yeah, similar kind of riff to it. Yeah, I definitely feel that. But this is a straight boogie woogie song. So, any song that's you take the guitars away and put in a piano in there and you're going to be in a roadhouse. It's a real pretty straightforward rock and roll song.
So true.
It was the song was originally called Shakin'. And they played it with Mother's Milk in that way. So they had a demo of the song, but by the time they got to recording it for the Boston album, it became Smokin'. So again, he's got these songs and they're working on them over and over and over again. So this is, again, a guy who's spending a lot of time reworking these songs and, the results are spectacular. So I can't complain about that.
Yeah, and then they saved the song Shakin' for Eddie Money. Come on.
Yeah, there you go. She was shaking.
Yeah. God bless Eddie Money.
Yeah. All right, let's listen to track number 6. This one is Hitch a Ride.
Wow. Wow.
See that clarity. You didn't hear clarity like this before this record, these sounds.
New York City, smoke like water runs inside. Still out of a tree.
So even on this kind of more mellow song, they still get into that, that solo part with the riff again. They originally titled this song San Francisco Day. And again, Tom Schultz played it in different variations throughout the years, and then eventually reworked it into Hitch a Ride for the Boston album.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you back to 1977, right? And I'm thinking about it now. I couldn't categorize this, right? I'm trying to think about it when I'm listening to this music. I can tell you where I was at and why. Boston just wasn't a part of my music. This whole, Aerosmith, yes, right. But during this time, this was my senior year in high school. You had Queen rocking it at that time, right? Black Sabbath still rocking it. Ted Nugent took over my life back in those days, so I can see how this is. Where would you categorize Boston, as in the rock and roll scheme of things, right?
It's pretty middle of the road. It was, anytime you get something that's that popular, it's way more accessible and broad. So, like you say, like when we talk about like Ramones and stuff, the Ramones were hugely popular, but for a small number of people. The Ramones never made any money really touring. I mean, they made some money in Europe, but here, I mean, the Ramones played at small clubs. They never played even theaters or anything.
Dude, at the peak, I was seeing them down the shore.
Yeah, right. You used to see the Ramones at bars. I think they even played I think the Ramones even played the Wayne Firehouse at one point. Like when they're, stuff like that. So when you get into, I think my point is that like sometimes the best music isn't understood by everybody. It's not as accessible to everybody. And this stuff was super accessible. I think the thing is it's a mix of rock, so there's a bit of an edge to it, but it's not like Black Sabbath. So where, so it's not scary to people. And we talked about this with Bowie. So the whole androgyny, it's the gay thing, the straight thing, the space alien, there's all this weird stuff and people are afraid of that at first. Yeah. And so this is very middle of the road, but I love it. I mean, it's still a great record.
The music's great, and I guess the phrase that would fit it best is like catchy, and
that's super catchy.
Yeah.
And the combination, and that's what helps it so much, is that it is catchy. The riffs are catchy, they're quick, they're to the point. The solos are very melodic. They don't wander off into Never Never Land. They stick along the melody line. The riffs are very accessible. The songs are not about anything threatening. It's not even like an AC/DC where they're, talking about groupies and stuff. It's very middle of the road. I had a dream about this girl I used to know, kind of stuff.
It just hit me. It's catchy, but you could still turn it up in your room and rock out. How's that?
Yeah, right. I mean? It's the rock without the danger, without the threat, so it's good boy rock and roll.
It's no wonder you like it.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's like you look at like an Aerosmith. Were like, their attitude was bad boys. It's like the Rolling Stones. Aerosmith were bad boys. These guys it's very, middle of the road, which I'm fine with. I think it's a fantastic record.
Oh, the music is amazing, fantastic. But like you said, it's a different energy. You're bringing a different energy than Aerosmith or a Ted Nugent.
Sure.
So you can see where I was at. I just mentioned Ted Nugent, Black Sabbath, and Aerosmith. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Right. And that's all stuff that scared your parents, Boston didn't scare them so much,
How do you like this, mommy?
Yeah. All right. So let's listen to track number 7. This is Something About You. They like these kind of fade-in type beginnings.
Yeah.
So this song, and that's my one, and it's not really a complaint, but the one thing about this record is that a lot of the songs are very similar.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when I would have never thought about the album, and this is why it's great that we do Inside the Album, because I get here and we can share this. They took a systematic approach to songwriting and creating these songs.
Yeah.
Literally systematic. What would sound good here? What would sound good here? Because I was just thinking about it. I watched an interview with Brad Whitford and Joe Perry one time, and they would stand across from each other and just start riffing. Right. And the next thing you know, it became a song.
Right. That's not happening with these guys. This is, like we said, this is an engineer mind planned out, it's all thought out. But this one was originally titled Life Isn't Easy, and it was written in 1975, and it was the last demo track that they wrote. And so, they put it on here on the second to last track on the album.
It's a good song.
Yeah, they're all super catchy, but it definitely, they all follow the same kind of model. There's not a lot of variance here. All right, so let's listen to the album Closer. This is number 8, and this one is Let Me Take You Home Tonight.
I'm really kinda shy, but I get this feeling whenever you walk by. I don't wanna down you, I wanna make you high. If you could see your way to me, come on and let me try. Let me take you home tonight. Mama, now it's alright. Let me take you home tonight. I'll show you sweet delight.
So this one is kind of, this is the real mellow 70s. Reminds me a little bit of Pure Prairie League.
The beginning of the song to me was a little bit of the riff was a little Rod Stewartish.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So in the 70s, pickup lines were big. And so this is, kind of a pickup line type thing. This is the song that they recorded in Los Angeles, and Brad Delp wrote it. So they went out to LA and the band recorded this. Tom Schultz stayed in Boston and kept working on the rest of the album. So this is kind of the, the smokescreen song that they did for the record company. And, they put it here on the end of the record. And to me, this one it's okay, but it's not my favorite song on the album.
Thanks. I'll leave it there. But I'd love to hear your favorite pickup line.
I never had a pickup line. It was so weird.
It's funny. We were just talking about that the other day somewhere. Yeah, me neither.
Too funny.
Could you help me find my way to my car?
Was that your pickup line?
Yeah. Could you take my keys, please?
So that's Boston by Boston.
Hey.
Hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we are going to do the first record from the Pretenders. So that'll be a little bit different than this one.
Yeah, let me tell you, I look forward to that, man.
Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorite albums, and so good. And it was one of those great albums that kind of brought punk out into the mainstream almost, not quite all the way, but
yeah, a lot of great stories behind that album. I look forward to sharing them and talking about it.
All right. Well,
that was
thanks.
Great.
Thanks everybody for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week on Inside the Album.
Thank you, everyone.